Next up on the broadcast, Attorney General Steve Marshall is back on the program. Mr. Attorney General, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Thank you for having me.
Welcome back to Capitol Journal.
Thank you.
I will begin with the State House being abuzz in the last week or so. Some subpoenas went out to some lawmakers over campaign finance spending. Specifically, they said about itemized credit card receipts. This is an ongoing investigation that your office is conducting. There may not be anything you can say. Is there anything you can say?
No, there isn't, and we don't even confirm or deny the existence of an investigation for a variety of reasons. But just because generally subpoenas have gone out, it's not necessarily pointing the finger at individuals or companies. It's because we would be needing information that are relevant to what we may be looking at. And so we have a really good group that is responsible for making sure that we enforce the ethics laws of this state, and regardless of the issue or the person, we're going to make sure that we do our job.
I want to talk, though, ethics reform, though I know campaign finance has been a part of our ethics reform efforts over the years, and you have some ethics reform legislation you're watching closely in this legislative session.
Well, and part of our legislative agenda was to make sure that we can present to the legislature a comprehensive package reviewing our ethics laws. Our desire is to make sure that we have both strong ethics laws, but also ones that are clear. And for 18 months, even before my time this process began, we've continued to work on what is, frankly, a complicated subject. And we've now been able to provide the leadership here with a draft of what we believe is appropriate. Look forward to being able to work with them in this discussion. But one thing that I do recognize is it's a difficult issue to be able to grasp in one setting. We need to make sure that we're doing a good job of educating those legislators on what it is that we're attempting to do and why. And then I think it's appropriate for there to be a full vetting of the work that we've done. But there's been a great deal of effort. I think we have consulted many people that both are directly involved in Alabama and also outside experts to be able to get their assistance. Very proud of the work that's been done by our office and look forward to being able to having that presented to be able to be reviewed.
Our ethics laws have been the subject of a lot of scrutiny over the last several years. They were heralded almost 10 years ago when they were first enacted as being some of the toughest in the nation, but some have started questioning the ethics laws given the ethics scandals that the state has weathered over the last few years. And there's also been some questions raised about some individual ethics bills that have been brought up. Critics would claim that they are attempts to water down our ethics laws.
Well, I think there's nothing that's been done to weaken our ethics laws. And in fact, the convictions that we've had over the years demonstrate the strength and the viability of that act. And I think we feel very confident that if no changes were made today, that we can continue to go forward aggressively and make sure that we deal with corruption in the state. But having said that, we need to continually be mindful of whether or not there are exceptions or loopholes that may exist in the law that are problematic. And I think it's incumbent upon us and those that care about good government to make sure that we close those loopholes and that we're identifying issues that those that would be out there wanting to violate the laws would find as a way of getting around it. And so we continue to review, continue to look at, and we'll make sure that we, from the standpoint of the Attorney General's office, do nothing that weakens our laws, but also to, again, make sure that we do a good job of clarifying our laws.
Closing those loopholes, as you referenced, is that primary to the ethics reform legislation?
I think it's part of it. And then I think also it is what we have learned over the years from investigations, what feedback we've received from others about where they believe that greater clarity is needed. And so we've tried to take all of those comments together and bring that in one comprehensive package. And again, it's a broad bill, it's a lengthy bill, and we recognize it's going to take some time to review, but we believe it's something that the public needs to see and our legislature needs to see, and that we can go from there.
How does it, in the context of our ethics laws already being considered some of the strongest, does it just ratchet up things to the next level? Or is it more about clarifying?
I think it's making sure it's strong and then also making sure it's clear. And that's why we want to, at least from our standpoint, make sure that that bill is out there for people to review. We're not immune to criticism. We welcome folks that have ideas that may be better than what we presented. But again, the purpose for us doing it is to maintain the strength of the act. And there's nothing that we will do or agree to that would otherwise take away from it. We look forward to the process, and I can say this, I've spoken to both Speaker McCutcheon and Speaker Pro Tem Marsh. They've not backed away from the idea that we can deal with that issue over time. I think they have made a commitment that they want to make sure that we have ethics laws in Alabama that make sense and are strong. And I appreciate the fact that they are committed to being able to do that. And we want to work with them and partner with them going forward.
Some individual bills that are ethics related, which are already out there, have taken some heat. Some critics believe they're just efforts to allow lawmakers to skirt existing ethics laws and create their own oversight, so to speak. And I know that that must not be where you're headed here.
Well, not at all. And we would weigh in on those bills going forward if we felt like they would weaken the law. You know, there's obviously very specific provisions relating to economic development. I know that's a part of the discussion, and I think that needs to be a vigorous debate. There are other provisions granting additional authority to the Ethics Commission that we've talked about with them at length and understand what they may be interested in being able to acquire within their statute. But we'll be engaged in that debate, look forward to being able to have that discussion. But our focus, again, is making sure that our laws remain strong.
A lot of lawmakers have said they get confused, especially where their personal job outside of the legislature is concerned versus their legislative duties. For instance, Representative Patricia Todd of Birmingham recently announced she's not seeking re-election. She said she has had trouble finding full-time employment because of the ethics laws as they exist.
Well, specifically what we saw with her complaint was that she wanted to be involved with an organization that had advocacy before the legislature, and we believed that combined two issues that really were not appropriate and not for somebody that wanted to serve in the legislature and still be able to advocate for changes in the law. Basically, it allows for her to sit in a position wearing two hats, and I think that's what we want to be able to eliminate. We believe that there are multiple people that serve that are able to do jobs of a variety of professions and occupations, and that our law will continue to allow that.
Some have also said the economic development aspect that you brought up might be a slippery slope, given that former House Speaker Mike Hubbard ran into some trouble in a consultant's capacity he had with one business, helping them with economic development versus his job as Speaker.
Right, and I think we need to continue to have that debate. I mean, I think there's some question of what are we defining as economic development? What does that really involve? What is the process, for example, of somebody wanting to locate in Alabama, and how does that work? And then we need to make sure that we've examined those facts as it relates to our law to allow for us to truly thrive in Alabama, to be able to recruit business, but not also allow it to happen in an illegal way.
You also have a data breach notification bill. Tell us about that.
You know, a second priority for us legislatively is to make sure that we're not one of only 2 states in the country that have a data breach notification bill that exists. You know, what we simply want to do is to make sure that if Alabama consumers have had their identity information breached and stolen, not because somebody has done anything wrong, but as a result of very creative hackers that are able to get that information, that our consumers find that out. Because one of the most difficult things that you can do is once your identifying information is stolen is to be able to restore your credit and to make sure that you're identifying ways that somebody can allow you to be a victim. And so we believe it's important to set the standard in Alabama, that we are allowing for companies outside and inside of Alabama that maintain this information to understand the duty that they're under, but to also make sure that it's clear that if somebody chooses to violate that law and not notify our consumers of information that they need, that we want to hold them accountable for that as well.
Data breach is a huge problem.
It is, and especially the notification to consumers when it takes place.
You also have a couple of bills you're recommending in conjunction with your work with the Governor's Opioid Council, right?
Yeah, you know, we obviously have presented that report to the Governor with 27 different recommendations about where we believe Alabama needs to go forward. There were some very specific proposals that came out of the report, including a fentanyl and carfentanil trafficking bill, which we think is critical for us from a law enforcement perspective to stop this flow of illegal drugs that's coming into Alabama and truly taking the lives of people in the state and around the country. You know, we've also been very proactive in trying to make sure that our PDMP is fully funded, and have appreciated the commitment that we've seen from legislative leadership in allowing that to go forward. But you know, Senator Ward and Representative Weaver have been very helpful for us in going forward, and believe that the issues that the council has identified is something the legislature's taken seriously, and we've already seen 2 bills pass along with the bill really relating to our ability to collect data and analyze not only the issues of what we face, but also whether or not we're making progress going forward. And I really appreciate the legislature embracing that and understanding it's important for us in this state.
Yeah, the fentanyl bill passed the Senate this week.
Yeah, and I think it was unanimous. And I think they understand the severity of that drug. You know, when truly, you know, a single packet of sugar is enough to kill lots of people in a room, that drug is unique, and we need to make sure that we're aggressively having the ability to prosecute those cases and holding those who would put those drugs on the street accountable.
I think Senator Cam Ward opened a lot of eyes in the chamber this week when he made the comparison. If I were to throw up a 1-gram packet of fentanyl into this room right now, it would probably kill everybody in the room.
Yeah, I mean, when a dosage of fentanyl, when it's appropriately given, is 2 grains of salt. 2 grains of salt. it tells you how powerful that medication is. And when we see synthetic fentanyl coming into our country from China, not only do we have to be aggressive in being able to find the sources, but when it gets here, that we have the vehicle to be able to prosecute those cases.
You also have a violent crime initiative.
Yeah, and that's something that's important for us in Alabama. When we see that our violent crime rate has increased by 13% over the last year, when we were already in the top 5 in the country, that we need to be able to aggressively deal with that issue. We recently made some arrests in Selma as a result of the work that we're being able to do in local communities. We're having multiple meetings in other places around the state where you'll see similar results going forward, but it's important for us is really the chief law enforcement office in the state to make sure that we're not only identifying that as an issue for us to be able to address in Alabama, but that we're also coming up with the ability to cooperate both with our federal partners and state and local partners to be able to make a difference on our streets. We've gotten really good feedback about what's taken place over in Selma, and I think you'll see some similar results going forward.
Remind us briefly about what happened in Selma.
We had 11 different arrests. It was a joint operation, including our partners with DEA. Individuals that are involved in activity not just relating to drugs, because drugs and violent activity go together, that were a significant problem in that community. Now, they're not the only ones, and we'll continue to work. We had a lengthy meeting there with probably 20 plus people in the room that represented a variety of disciplines from the public safety side. And the message there was very clear, is that we're not just here today and going back, but instead we're in that community, going to be viable in that community, and going to be able to make a difference. We've seen some really good help from the police department in Selma, from the sheriff's department in Dallas County, but also from the U.S. Attorney's Office as well. And so very grateful that Michael Jackson, the DA there, wanted to be proactive, that sought our assistance and help. And I think the people of that community have already seen the initial results from this initiative that we've started.
Speaking of violent crime, Vernon Madison avoided execution here in Alabama last week for the second time for a Mobile police murder, and I know that was very frustrating to your office.
It is very frustrating to the office. Vernon Madison committed that offense when I was a junior in college, and I'm 53 years old. That's not justice, and so we're very much focused on being able to provide that family the finality of the judge's order in that case. We hope the Supreme Court will take up that petition, and I expect them to deny cert, and so that we will then ask the Supreme Court to set another date going forward. But we believe that time has come for that case to be finished and for justice to be served through the execution in that case.
The argument is that Mr. Madison suffers from dementia and that he doesn't remember the crime and that he doesn't understand that he's about to be executed. But there have been other rulings prior to last week that found that while he may not remember the actual killing, there was the realization that he was about to be executed for a crime that he was told he committed.
And we've had experts that disagree with the assessment of what Mr. Madison truly remembers. That's been fully vetted now, and the Supreme Court actually dealt with that issue already. It's an additional question that's come up to them now, but we feel very confident that we stand on solid ground in making sure that this execution is constitutional, and believe that we presented information to the court to be able to allow them to reach that same conclusion.
There's also a bill this year dealing with Anthony Ray Hinton, who was released from prison after several decades due to some new evidence. It was found that he had insufficient legal representation during his original trial, and thus he was released. There's a move to compensate him for being wrongfully incarcerated, and the argument is being made, well, he was only found to have had ineffective legal counsel. They didn't say he was innocent of the crime.
Right. He has not been exonerated. One of the reasons why the Fair Justice Act that we passed last session was so important is that these Rule 32 petitions that challenge the effective assistance of counsel can be heard sooner to the time of trial. Many, many years passed from when Mr. Hinton was convicted to the point the court was ordering a new trial. Many things can happen. Witnesses can die, evidence can be lost, and other essential pieces of the prosecution may not be available for them to retry him. Mr. Hinton was not able to be retried, but at no point in time has he been exonerated of this particular offense.
And remember just what the offense was again.
It was of murder.
Mm-hmm.
It was of murder, and a horrific act for which he was convicted. We've analyzed the file along with the DA's office in Jefferson County. The fact that they couldn't go forward is not saying they didn't believe he was guilty, and we don't believe that Mr. Hinton is entitled to any compensation.
And finally, a big legal victory for the state recently when we won the voter ID lawsuit.
A significant victory, and I think For Secretary Merrill, I think it was a validation of the efforts that he's gone through to make sure that anybody who wanted an ID to be able to vote would have that opportunity. In fact, I think the court was very impressed by the fact that the Secretary of State's office went to significant effort to make sure that anybody that wanted it, to the point that somebody would show up at their house to be able to make that ID, showed that Alabama truly was meaningfully involved in making sure that the ID was for the purpose of ensuring that our elections are fair and appropriate. And so we were very pleased with the judge's decision, feel very strong that we'll be able to uphold that on appeal, and I think it shows that Alabama takes our election seriously.
Attorney General Steve Marshall, always a pleasure to
Thank you very
show.
much. Look forward to being back.
Thanks for your leadership.
Thank you.